Hi everyone, Chilled Unskilled here. I thought I'd make a very short video on the build I'm currently playing for Last Epoch Season 2. I initially started this season with the Rogue. I was very curious to try out Heartseeker with Marksman, and so that's kind of what I started with, and I got that character all the way through to level 91 before basically giving up on it. Not entirely giving up on it, but the main reason for it is just endless frustration because I unfortunately have to connect to EU West from Africa, and so I sit with an average of about 170 millisecond ping, and the net result of that is input delay, which you can kind of work around, but you also have, well, I've experienced pretty severe rubber banding, and I have numerous deaths at this point on Rogue, which is inherently a squishier class, just because of that. And it got very frustrating to the point of me starting to not enjoy myself, really. And so I figured instead of playing offline, I would try a slightly tankier class and stay online, just in case, you know, any friends of mine wanted to play. And yeah, that's what I've done. I rolled a Sentinel, playing Void Knight. Currently got that up to just shy of level 95 now. And I'll go through a quick walkthrough of gear, skills, passives, and I'll run one small echo just so that you can get a sense of how the build plays. We'll start with gear. The build is, just so that everyone is aware, still kind of scuffed. I have a few pieces that I need, but it's nowhere near finalized, so you can think of this as still very early in-game. Still, as you can see, hoarding rings to try and find replacements for certain parts of my gear at this point. So just bear with me when you see the gear, it's really not optimized. But the build is still doing relatively well, although I am only level 140 corruption at this point. So I'm actively working at the moment to get that up, just to see how the build performs at higher difficulties. We'll start with the helmet. So currently this is, I mean, the res is fine. The armor I don't really care about. The 99 increased void damage is decent, and then the +1 to Devouring Orb. I would ideally want this somewhere on my person to be plus to Smite, because that is our main source of damage. So Devouring Orb's okay, but Smite is definitely what I'm targeting. I just really have not had much luck in having the plus levels to Smite drop on any pieces of gear at this point, so kind of starved for those crafting shards right now. I have a Devotion. This is one part of the build. This one, my first one that dropped actually, came with 1 LP. I've rolled increased spell damage on this, just because Smite obviously is a spell. And the amulet itself is pretty decent, right? So most of it revolves around having increased cast speed and damage with Smite based on missing mana. I don't have that much in the way of mana spend at the moment, so this is probably not doing as much for me as maybe a decent rare, but it's part of the build I was kind of shooting for, so I'm wearing it for now. I'm using the Wrong Warp Wand. This took ages to try and get. Eventually, after I don't know how many Runes of Ascendance, I had one craft, which was really nice, and I've had it equipped ever since. There's a lot of texture. Really, the two lines or pieces of this that you care about for this build, at least, is the chance to gain haste for 1 second, and also the increased spell damage per 1% increased move speed. That's pretty huge for this build, and even with these kind of average boots, it's a fairly substantial chunk of increased spell damage I'm getting just from having that. So the ideal setup would be I need to farm, I think it's actually in the last room where I am at the moment. There's a unique pair of boots that comes with a pretty high roll on move speed inherent on the boots. And if I can get that with 1 LP, I'll transfer over a move speed roll from like this pair of boots, for example, and just have like a double move speed roll on my boots. That'll be a big bump in damage for me. So that's kind of the short-term plan at this point. So combined with farming my corruption levels, I'm trying to hunt for these boots wherever I can. My rings are really not all that great. This one's only got, well, I guess the crit strike avoidance is nice. I have mental scarring from my experience on Rogue, my first class. So yeah, stacking defensive where I can is kind of part of the game plan for this build. But this has got increased spell damage and increased crit chance, which is nice. It's on the wrong base though. My Sapphire Ring, this is pretty throwaway. I mean, it has increased spell damage and stun avoidance, which I've been messing around with. But I am actively, as you can see, hoarding rings at the moment to get a replacement for this. Armor, I have a nice vitality roll on here. It could be slightly higher, I guess, 1 point. But that's a tier 6, so ideally a tier 7 vitality roll here would be ideal. I am using vitality stacking on this, and I'll explain why when we get to the passive tree. But basically, I've converted Smite to scale instead of with attunement to scale with vitality. The increased health is nice. Increased armor as a sealed stat, I won't say no to. And the fire raise is helpful, although I think I'm currently overcapped on fire by quite a lot, so also a wasted stat there. I'm using Bulwark of the Last Abyss. I'm using this mostly just for the buff it gives you. So the downside is that when you're on high health, basically every 3 seconds, you lose 25% of whatever your current health is, and it gives you the buff for 3 seconds. The buff gives us increased void damage, so 70%, and also increased crit strike multi for melee. We're obviously not melee, so I don't care about that, but the increased void damage is nice. The belt, increased void damage, increased health, potion resistance, slightly overcapped on potion resistance, so I could probably replace this belt with something better, which I'm actively looking for at the moment as well. Gloves, I'm using Grasp of the Blood Mage. This was the first pair that dropped for me, and it happened to have 2 LP. So just for quality of life at the moment, I've thrown cast speed on there, and it happened to choose another stat that I'm not unhappy about, but didn't want. So yeah, that's how it works, I guess, RNG. This was a huge boost to survivability, though, for me. The main thing here is that it basically says if you take a hit from a rare or a boss, 20% of that hit damage is dealt over 4 seconds instead of immediately. And obviously with sources of leech these gloves give you, and also sources of leech on my passive tree, it's it means I can heal through some of the bigger hits. So, you know, if I'm obviously with the 170 ms ping, if I miss that input timing and I get tagged by a biggish hit, I can kind of leech through it. That's been very helpful for survivability. And then the flat spell crit strike chance is also really nice, 3% there. Relic, this is pretty trash. The increased void damage is okay, but I would definitely like to replace this. It's not really doing a whole lot for me. Idols, I have gotten relatively lucky with idols, and I have 4 of the idols that increase damage with Smite. And I've also managed to get them all to roll with some kind of increased crit strike chance and crit multiplier. I think my lowest is 47% on this. No, 39%. Okay. So I do still need to get slightly better idols, but they're pretty good for now. Skills-wise, Symbols of Hope. I'm using this primarily because of the damage that it gives you and the increased crit chance. I've also got a couple of... Oh, I've got 3 points in here for the fire damage per symbol, but that's a travel node just to unlock the Symbols of Despair. So that just increases my void damage per active symbol as well. So that's great for the build. The cooldown recovery speed I will never say no to. It just helps, you know, this thing generate its symbols. I think it helps generate the symbols a bit better. Or at least it helps you when you use the skill to have it off cooldown a bit sooner. I never actively use this. Really, the only thing I care about is just having the symbols up at all times. I am also running the +1 to max symbols. So that's just increased damage and crit chance. And then I also have this one node here for double health regen from symbols. I don't think that this node is doing a whole lot for me. I haven't really messed around with respecking this, but I plan to. I'm just not really entirely sure where I would shove this. Probably end up in iron symbols for the endurance threshold. Unless I find something else that seems interesting. I don't really think there's anything else here that interests me, though. Possibly Symbols of Hope gain rate. I'm not sure. Devouring Orb. This is the kind of trash clearing ability that I'm running with. Obviously, initially I spec'd into making this orbit and then also having it auto-cast while moving. I have the Cosmic Impact. This just lets the orbs actually impact with enemies, so it collides with them when you hit them. And then I've scaled the collision damage a little bit. I've picked up the flat global more void damage here and increased mana regen. This is super worthwhile as soon as you get your vitality at 90 or above, because it basically doubles the bonuses from this. I've also picked up the Void Essence chance, so basically gaining a Void Essence when a Devouring Orb expires. The Devouring Orbs casting Abyssal Emissions helps with clear, so they just send out these little orbs that kind of home in on enemies as you run around the map, and then kind of explode when you hit when it hits them. So that helps with clear. I've also spec'd the Void Res Shred chance and the Slow chance here. So the Slow chance kind of plays into a couple of the passives on the tree, but the Void Res Shred is great. It just means enemies take more damage. And then I've been trying these 2 points here. So I've got these two here at the moment just to increase the rate at which those Abyssal Orbs spawn. It's kind of a quality of life thing. It feels a little bit better, to me at least, when I'm running around the map. But I'm not sure really how much this is doing. So yeah, this is definitely 2 points I would probably say you could spec somewhere else. I am using Healing Hands at the moment, so that's proccing off Smite because I'm self-casting Smite. So I've obviously got the 100% chance into Smite cast here, and then I'm using it as a travel skill at the moment as well. I have gone through to pick up the increased damage and reduced damage taken nodes over here, along with the increased dispel damage based on your increased healing effectiveness. So, I mean, this is really great because you kind of scale that with this point here. So as soon as Healing Hands goes off, you get increased healing effectiveness as well. And then if you can get healing effectiveness on your gear, that'll also just help scale your spell damage. Smite, this is the main damage dealer. Obviously, everyone's going this route, but I'm using Sacrifice. That's just a huge 250% damage increase. I have moved this over to Void. So this also basically moves Ignite chance into Time Rot chance. I have the Sacrifice health slight reduction here. I've got 2 points in the Blind chance and then 2 points in this double cast chance. Honestly, the double cast chance I think I'm probably going to get rid of and dump them into base crit chance here, just to help boost the damage. If you are already crit capped, you could look at dumping them into critical multiplier. I've also gone for Ignite chance here and then hit damage versus ignited enemies. So this just scales hit damage, basically. I need to check, but I'm not entirely sure if this node here kind of nullifies these two or not. I haven't really tested at the moment. I'm doing enough damage to clear the stuff that I'm running. It seems fine. But I'm not using Fissure. So I think Fissure is kind of the popular build at the moment. I've seen a few short clips and videos of people doing obscene amounts of damage with Fissure. So, I mean, go that route if you'd like. I just wanted to try scaling the actual hit damage of Smite instead. I've also got Anomaly. So this is a buff and debuff ability. So to make sure I get most value from it, I did move and grab the Time Bubble is cast on you node. This just means when I cast it, it puts the bubble on me and it follows me everywhere I move for the full duration. The buffs it gives are things like increased attack speed and cast speed. So cast speed for this build is great. I am toying with the idea of trying something like using multi-strike to proc Smite instead, because I think you can have that proc up to 4 smites per multi-strike if you spec the tree properly. And then obviously the attack speed would help. It would mean I need to drop Healing Hands, so reduction in survivability there. I'm not too sure how that would feel, but I think it would certainly increase damage at least. I'm also running the increased crit strike chance nodes over here, and then also time bubble duration. That makes sense, right? More value from the increased cast speed and the increased to crit chance. These 2 points here are travel nodes, really, just to get down to Mark of Rot. The main thing for this, a big debuff on enemies, basically, but the main thing this does is the only thing it does is it makes enemies take 50% increased void damage. So that's really nice. You pop this bubble, run into an enemy, and just start wailing on them with smites, and yeah, your damage goes through the roof just from having it up. So that's been a nice damage increase for the build overall. Passives, Sentinel. Vitality. So again, I am trying to get as much vitality on the build as I can. I don't think I'm currently at the 90 or plus, so still working on that. But you've seen my gear is really not that great. I've also used, well, I've dumped a few nodes in here. This is really great for the minus 10% damage taken from nearby enemies. And then Time and Faith. So this is just to regain mana and a portion of your missing health whenever you directly use one of those 4 skills. Smite is obviously what we're running at the moment. If I did try the multi-strike route, it would still apply, so this is great. Paladin, 15 points really just to unlock Symbols of Hope. So these were Elemental Res, which I needed. Attunement doesn't matter because my Smite scales of Vitality now. The block and block chance or block effectiveness and stun avoidance, and then spell damage with shields. Obviously, I'm using a shield at this point. As soon as I try out the Smite build, the multi-strike build, what I'd need to do is put 1 extra point in here. This lets me equip a sword in my offhand. So basically, I can keep my Wrong Warp Wand and just have a sword in my offhand, which then would be what multi-strike uses. Multi-strike would trigger smites. Then on to Void Knight. So health and Void Res, Fizz Res. With 5 points in here, you get an additional reduction in damage taken from Void and Physical of 5%. That's why I've got the 5 points in here. 1 point here, this is really just travel to unlock this. This is a big chunk of Leech. So 3% of Void damage leached as health. Obviously melee damage doesn't count here because we're not currently using any melee skill. So that's kind of throwaway, but if I do try multi-strike, I will get the benefit of both. And then I have 3 points in here. This is just to increase health leech and the health leech rate, just for survivability. You can mess around with whether or not these actually make that much of a difference to you. I haven't really taken them out of the build to check, but I've kept them in for now and they seem to be fine. This is flat increase health, so this is great for survivability again. And then a chance to absorb health on kill. So I think this is 5% of the enemy health when you kill them, if it procs. So this again, just survivability. 5 points here, so the increased crit strike chance is nice, but the big thing here is the bonus 5 points bonus. So this just gives you an extra % crit multiplier per point spent in your Void Knight tree. So currently for me, this is 72% crit multi. So it's a big damage increase. This is very nice to have. Again, more vitality here, and then the increased cooldown recovery speed. This combined with cooldown recovery on the skill tree for like Anomaly, for example, means that I nearly have perfect uptime on it. There is a small window after it runs out where I can't cast, but it's really not a big deal. This here just for the penetration for Void, and then also the 5 point bonus gives you frailty chance and slow chance, which is, I mean, CC is never unwelcome. I'm currently putting points into this, so the idea is to get to at least 4 here. This is just more Void damage as a base global multiplier. But it also means you take less damage from slowed enemies and less damage from enemies that are affected by Time Rot. And we are doing both. So that's a nice 10% damage reduction from enemies that are affected by both. The increased cast speed here is great with 15%, but the 5 points were necessary because I wanted to swap my Smite from scaling from attunement to vitality. So that's what this node does. And that's why I'm also trying to stack vitality on my gear. That's kind of a really nice 2 birds with 1 stone type thing, because not only do I scale damage when I get vitality, but I also scale my health, which is really great. This 1 point here, this is Echo Chance and Time Rot Chance. I don't think this is doing anything for me. I'll probably end up taking this out and putting it somewhere else. This again, vitality and increased health. So this 20% health here, and then where was the node with 10? There was a node somewhere else with 10% here. And then the 5 point bonus is kind of neat. So this just means I get an additional health per point of vitality. Instead of 1, it's 2. This just again adds to the survivability of the build. This is increased void damage. Mostly just here is travel at the moment to get this for echo chance and increased armor. Again, I'm not really sure how much this is doing. I might consider getting rid of this at some point. I haven't tested without it though. I've just put the point in there without thinking too much. But the 5-point bonus here is really great. So this just reduces the effect of slows and chills on your character. Crit chance. So this is a 5% base crit, I think. And then Mortal Cleave, which is nice. Just basically you get this whenever you hit enemies on low health. And it gives you an increased damage buff, so 10% increased damage. And then I have 2 points here at the moment. This is just reduction in elemental damage taken. Oh, sorry, this converts 20% of elemental damage taken into void damage. So that gets negated by your void res. And then this, in addition, gives you 8% less void damage taken overall. So this is just a bump in survivability again for the class. So I will run a quick echo. I'm not going to talk while I do this. I'm not too sure how the game volume is going to come through with the mic and everything. And also, I'm not super comfortable talking and playing at the same time yet. So I'll run this quickly and you can have a look at how the build functions. Kind of see the damage it's doing. I am still very low corruption, so this is only at 140 corruption. I'm busy working on getting that stacked up at the moment, so hopefully in the next day or two I should get this up to 300 or 400, maybe more. And we'll see how the build performs then. General gameplay loop though is I use Healing Hands as a traversal skill. So basically when that's off cooldown I just cast it to get around. My trash clear is mostly left to my the orbs. And then tankier targets, or if I need to cast Smite, I use Smite to kill stuff quickly. And then obviously for very tanky stuff, if you really want to get your damage up, you just pop Anomaly, run into them, and just lean on Smite basically, and you're good to go.
Do that.
Cool. That's the Echo. Build is not too bad. Super low corruption level, so obviously difficulty is not as high as it could be. But you can see the build doesn't really have any issues killing anything. A couple of the tankier enemies, Microchance isn't perfect yet, but you know, a couple of the tankier ones take a little bit of time to kill, but it's really not that long. So yeah, I mean, give it a try, tweak it as you see fit, and probably also I would recommend going to check out some of the more experienced content creators for Last Epoch, guys like Perry the Pig or Dreadful, possibly even guys like Rax and Steel Mage, and I believe a whole host of them are now playing and streaming Last Epoch, so you get a lot more useful information about how to properly build your characters from there. But so far, this has proven to be quite fun and seems to be working relatively well for me, at least for now. So as I get the gear improved and things like that, hopefully it just goes from strength to strength. And yeah, I'll keep playing. So far, the season has been super entertaining. So hope you all enjoy Last Epoch's new season. And yeah, best of luck with the builds. May RNG smile on you. Cheers, everyone.